Sherman's march to the sea was aided by an unexpected ally. Tens of thousands of slaves, newly emancipated from Lincoln's decree and liberated from bondage by Sherman's armies, had tagged along with Sherman on his march. Sherman never entertained any ideas about giving the slaves weapons to fight side by side with his Union troops. He was not an abolitionist before the war and did not believe in Negro equality. He did, however, possess the good sense to not turn down an offer of help when he saw it. He put the newly freed men and women to work performing a wide variety of menial labor, such as digging latrines, clearing land to construct roads, farming food and cotton for his soldiers, and burying the dead. Despite the fact that the freedmen had just only escaped servitude doing roughly the same quality of work, the thousands of blacks who attached themselves to Sherman's forces willingly and gratefully obliged. So impressed by the efforts put forth by the freed slaves, which in turn had freed up so many more of his own men to fight in early 1865, Sherman recognized their tremendous sacrifice on his march by granting 40 acres of land confiscated from southern plantations to each former slave family, along with a mule to work the land. Sherman knew that their work was crucial to his own success, and he thanked them for it. Sadly, after Lincoln's assassination later that year, new President Andrew Johnson had rescinded Sherman's orders. Each former slave had to give up their new land and return it to the plantation owners from whence it came. With General Lee's surrender at Appomattox on April 9, 1865, a long national nightmare had ended. The South surrendered to the will of the North. The Union was preserved. Now the only question that remained was how to reconstruct or rebuild a nation which had been so ravaged by war. This issue would prove to be almost as complex as the causes leading up to the Civil War. President Lincoln had made it clear that he favored a plan that would treat the South very leniently. All Confederates would be pardoned by the U.S. government, except for high-ranking officials and those convicted of abuse of prisoners of war. And when only 10% of each rebellious state swore allegiance to the Union, that state could then be readmitted to the Union and once again send representatives and senators to Washington, as well as allow its citizens the right to vote. Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, and Virginia all quickly jumped on this offer and speedily conceded to Lincoln's demands, and were readmitted to the United States. Lincoln, however, was assassinated in May of 1865, just one short month after the Civil War ended. 7 rebellious states still needed to be dealt with. With Lincoln's death, a split between the new president, Andrew Johnson, and Congress had formed. A large minority of Congress members, known as Radical Republicans, felt Lincoln's plan did not go far enough to punish the South. They wanted to destroy all political power the former slaveholders held. Furthermore, they wanted to extend full citizenship and voting rights to the freed slaves. Johnson, like Lincoln, favored leniency towards the South. He pardoned 13,000 former Confederates, but did try to destroy the economic and political power of the South's plantation-owning class. Johnson was combative over the rights of the freedmen, as he felt that white men alone must manage the South. Led by radical Republicans, Congress had passed 2 pieces of legislation. One enlarged the Freedmen's Bureau, an agency that helped educate, feed, clothe, and aid the freed slaves. The other was the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which would have given blacks full citizenship and banned the passing of black codes, discriminatory laws that severely restricted the quality of freedom enjoyed by blacks across the nation after slavery's end. Now I say these acts would have been powerful tools to integrate blacks into American society economically, politically, educationally, and socially, had President Johnson not vetoed them, claiming they were beyond the scope of any of the intentions of those who wrote the Constitution. Perhaps he neglected to consider also how the framers never intended for a civil war either. Frustrated by Johnson's block of their actions, the radical and more moderate Republicans who gained control of Congress in 1866 impeached Johnson for his decision to illegally fire the Secretary of War. The Senate, however, voted not to convict Johnson, and the president remained in office until the end of his term in 1868, when Ulysses S. Grant was elected for the first of his 2 terms. Politically, the late 1860s saw the passing of the three amendments which were a direct response to the Civil War itself. Called the Civil War Amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution would provide legal and political equality for blacks, but not necessarily social or cultural equality. The 13th Amendment, passed in December of 1865, put an end to slavery once and for all. The 14th Amendment, passed in 1868, guaranteed all citizens of the country the right to equal protection under national law. Interestingly, the 14th Amendment also officially lays down the very first limit on states' powers by declaring that no state may deny any United States citizen of their rights, their life, liberty, or property without due process of law. This amendment would arguably become the single most important amendment in the Constitution, as it would later be used as a means to obtain equal rights for people of all colors, women, minors, and the elderly, right up through the present day. The 15th Amendment, passed in 1870, granted voting rights to citizens of the United States, regardless of race, color, or creed. Women, however, were still denied the right to vote and wouldn't get it until 1920. Also of note, none of these amendments dictated who could or could not become U.S. citizens, outside of freed slaves and their descendants, as well as European-descended whites. Later in America's history, denying the rights bestowed by the 14th and 15th Amendments to the people of Asian descent would prove rather easy, as it would soon be impossible for them to ever become U.S. citizens. The South, meanwhile, was absolutely devastated in the wake of the Civil War. More than 250,000 Confederates died in the fighting, and the destruction caused inflation in the South to rise to over 7,000%. That is, a product which cost $1 before the war would cost more than $70 afterwards. Further roadblocks to Reconstruction in the South rose in the form of carpetbaggers and scalawags, two of the three groups who made up the Southern Republicans. Carpetbagger was a nickname given to northern speculators and investors who saw an opportunity to buy up lots of cheap southern land in its depressed economy. They were called carpetbaggers because they were supposedly in such a hurry to get down south and make money that they traveled with so few packed belongings, only enough to carry in small bags made from carpet. Scalawags were white Southerners who joined the Republican Party, at the disgust of their former Confederates. Many were small farmers who did not want to see the wealthy plantation owners rise back into power. Freed African Americans in the South signed up for the Republican Party in droves. 9 of 10 voted Republican, the only party who had made any overtures of equality to them. Many former slaves were able to greatly improve their lives immediately after the Civil War and during the early years of Reconstruction. The few who could read or write found steady work teaching at the freedmen's schools. Others migrated in search of family members who had been sold to different plantations before the war. Others still took a strong interest in local, state, and national politics. Hiram Revels became the first African American ever elected to the Senate in 1870. To this day, there have been only 6 African Americans to ever serve in the Senate.